Between Plays. It's the journey and what you do between where you are and where you want to be. Research, prepare, plan, and execute your strategy. Do your DD and stay strong in visualizing and achieving your goals. Our strategy is unique since 2020. An original concept imitated, never duplicated. Real conversations with media influencers, educational and expert speakers, analysts and consultants. Between Plays, bridging the gap between companies and investors.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Between Plays Stock Market Strategies. And today we have with us John Pasalacqua. How you doing today, John?
Yeah, very good, Albert. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, you know what? Your story is so interesting. Definitely want all of the people out there to be able to hear this. John, you have a company that's called First Phosphate, and you have a very interesting story that's coming out of the Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean area. What I'd like to do is before that, though, is I'd like for people to get to know you a little bit first. Could you talk to me a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I guess you're looking for my personal background, where I come from, who I am, what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
So, look, I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I've done things, the different way. I've worked in companies, but very early on, I went on my own. I've had several entrepreneurial businesses. Most recently, I've been running my own family office that's been investing in certain companies. This opportunity here at First Phosphate was just, so important and so massive that I thought it was important for me to become the CEO. I've been, owner and president of my own company, but I've never done anything in the public markets before in terms of, running a company, but I've seen a lot. And I've also been exposed to a lot, and I've also been invested in a lot. And I just wanted this one really close to us, the board, the management, all the significant shareholders. We want to have really, really good control on this because we want to make it a success. We see a massive blue sky opportunity here. We see a once in a generation opportunity to create something that could be the next very large company in the phosphate space. So we want to make sure it's done right. Now, that puts a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. I'm going to try and do my best, but we're working it hard every day. So yeah, I've transitioned from running my own private family office to being the CEO of First Phosphate.
So running from your own family office to First Phosphate. So I find that very interesting because you want to be the CEO of First Phosphate. So why First Phosphate? Like, what brought you over? What intrigued you? What made you want to or compel you to go over to First Phosphate?
Yeah, so I guess to expand upon your question about asking me about my background, I've been involved in technology since 1998. I used to run certain search engines on the internet that were dedicated to trade shows. So I cut my teeth very early on the internet and on technology. And throughout my investing career, I've always been involved in technology. Before running my own family office, I ran some very interesting stock trading techniques that were linked to technology. So that all comes from my background about 1998 after finishing business school, which was to get into technology. So we look at First Phosphate, we look at the batteries, we look at the EV sector really as technology. But we've identified that there's one problem behind all this technology, and it really is raw materials. And I think you've seen that discussion around for a very long time. Everyone's talking the gigafactories, everyone's talking EV targets, creating all these new compliant EVs, cars, machinery, etc. That doesn't have a carbon footprint. But in order to get there, you need raw materials, and there's a real problem with the raw materials. They're just not going to be there. Our emissions targets, our targets on EVs I believe are going to be drastically delayed because the raw materials are just not there. So we thought, rather than focusing where everyone else is focusing, which is at the end of the chain, which is on the big picture, let's focus on the little picture. Instead of doing a tops-down approach to the battery materials and EV sector, let's do a bottoms-up approach. So what do we mean by bottoms-up? We mean working right from the mine and bringing it to a state that's ready for the technology companies to integrate and to create the products that we need. because if more of that doesn't happen, there's not going to be an EV revolution. So we're working this one from the basement, from the bottoms up, as opposed to the tops down. And we're going to meet, I think you've heard the expression before where the bottoms up meets the tops down. So we want to be the bottoms up that's going to meet the tops down, the bottoms up from the minerals and the strategy to get, into the batteries. And we're going to meet the guys who are making the EVs and the batteries halfway.
Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean area is in Quebec, right? And the thing is that why Quebec? Why Canada? I mean, when we look at First Phosphate, we can see that we can understand that it's linked to the EV community through the minerals. But I think that we need to go a little bit more in the background for everybody that's watching out there. Because when we look at phosphate, a lot of people are going to be like, well, look, there's a lot of other phosphate companies out there. Now, I don't want, people to get all mixed up about this and start putting their money into different areas because they're going, oh, well, we're going to put it over here and over there. But there's a big difference, right, between phosphate when you're talking agriculture and phosphate when we're talking like for EV batteries. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And maybe what I'll do is let me take some time here to, maybe I'll show my screen and I'll show you a few slides that's going to touch upon, everything that you've mentioned there, right? This is the presentation for First Phosphate. Now, you asked about, what's so special about Quebec? Well, I want to just flip down here to a slide that's going to show you, where phosphate is in the world. And you asked about phosphate in agriculture. So 90% of the world's phosphate is still used in agriculture, and that's going to be, a primary driver, right? And if we look at, what phosphate has done in agriculture since the 1960s, you'll see this growth curve. This is how much phosphate has been used, phosphate rock to make fertilizer from 1960 to 2010. And this is the projected growth curve to about 2100, okay? And that's just basically fertilizer. You don't have industrial use in there. And, here's a little picture of, basically the peak phosphate predicted for 2030, 2040. This was before LFP battery and a lot of industrial uses. And here you see the price of, phosphate, Morocco rock phosphate being, the main one, the main driver of price, or the benchmark price, and what it's been doing as of late, okay, since 2021. Obviously, the Ukraine war affects that, but also, a number of other factors. COVID affected it, supply chain shortages, and growing populations. As you see this curve here, that's just food. That's what we're going to need phosphate for food. It's a sad state of affairs in a sense, that the world's population cannot be fed anymore without fertilizer, and without phosphate, without potassium, nitrogen, and ammonia, you can't create the fertilizer to feed the people, right? So fertilizer, phosphate, very important. Now, I want you to focus on this as well. These are the countries that produce and export phosphate. So, when you look at it, phosphate is really a game of Morocco. This is all of Morocco here. Most of the phosphate is found in, northern regions of Africa. Now, peak phosphate, some people say, well, there's no problem for peak phosphate because Morocco is always going to have the phosphate. That is true to a certain extent. There's decades, maybe even more than that, of phosphate available in Morocco and to some degree in the northern regions of Africa. But when you look at it from all the other countries in the world here, all these little other thin slices, nobody else has got it. Everybody's extinguishing, right? Like our reserves in North America are extinguishing. The reserves in Brazil do not cover enough agriculture. It's imported from Morocco. North America imports from Morocco. Australia is importing from Morocco. And now even China has started to import, and China's put massive export restrictions because they need the phosphate for agriculture, but they also need it for LFP battery. They currently make over 95% of the world's LFP batteries. So there's extreme shortages of phosphate, right? So that's a very important thing to understand about phosphate, number one, okay? Now, number two, I'm gonna explain to you the differences between the different phosphates that you find in different parts of the world. So, it's just like other commodities out there. You can find phosphate in sedimentary rock, or you can find it in igneous rock. So sedimentary rock being, rock structures that are, kind of fragile. It's sort of been accumulated in seabeds over, the millennia. And it's more brittle, right? It's sedimentary deposit. You can almost break it with a hammer. I mean, they're all different, but that's just a broad generalization. That's good to keep in mind. Now, when you move to the igneous deposits, so the sedimentary here are red. So you see that's most of the world. That's 95% of the world's phosphate. Okay, and that's mostly good for fertilizer. Now, 5% of the world's phosphate is igneous rock, meaning it's sort of a derivative or something that was caught in lava or magma millions of years ago. It has settled in there. Now, when it has settled in lava, it's generally much cleaner than what it is in sedimentary rock, but it's only 5% of the world's rock, right? So we have it here in Quebec, a little bit in Ontario, in the northern peninsula of Kola Peninsula of Russia, a little bit in the Scandinavian countries, a little bit throughout Africa, and some of it in Brazil. Now that divides up into two types, carbonatites and anorthosites. Igneous rock is already much purer than sedimentary, but within the igneous, the anorthosites, which generally we only find here in Quebec, in the Lac-St-Jean region of Quebec. And that's why when you brought up Quebec, I really wanted to give you this background to explain that. This is probably the purest form of phosphate that you'll find in the world within anorthosite. It is so clean. It certainly has trace elements like the other ones, but they're just to such low quantities that they don't even matter. It's not radioactive. When you process phosphate, when you take phosphate out of the ground, it's called phosphate ore. Then it goes through what's called the beneficiation process, meaning you've got to get rid of the contaminants. Sedimentary deposits have a lot of contaminants, all these red ones. They have lots of uranium, they have lots of cadmium, thorium, selenium, a number of other damaging elements. For instance, when you take phosphate out of the ground, even as fertilizer, which is the base case, you can generally not spread that directly on fields. Sometimes you can, but most times you can't, because you'll end up poisoning the fields. This has been done already in certain parts of the world, and it's been equivalent to a nuclear device hitting the farmlands. You can't farm on them anymore. So we don't make that mistake anymore. So we have to purify. In the purification process around sedimentary deposits, it ends up, you have to take out all that radioactivity. So you create these big gypsum slag piles. For every 1 ton of merchant grade phosphoric acid, which is the base for fertilizer industry, you get 5 tons of gypsum slag. Now these gypsum slag piles, I can show you a little bit about them. This is what a gypsum slag pile looks like. And this is a pond to dry out the gypsum after they've cleaned it up for fertilizer use. And this is what it looks like once it's done. Now this remains radioactive, okay? And it has to stay, in the United States, for instance, the Environmental Protection Agency says that these, slag piles need to remain there inert in the environment. You can't do anything with them. The problem though is the storms. The storms ends up washing this stuff sometimes back into the environment. Sometimes these dikes break. Sometimes there's a tear in the lining that's underneath these things. It gets into the sinkholes. There's big problems in southern United States with this. But when you have, igneous rock that doesn't have the same levels of trace elements, what happens with that gypsum that is formed as part of the purification process of phosphate, you can now reuse it in agriculture. You can reuse it in cement. You can reuse it in plaster. But that only happens with igneous rock. So this is why igneous rock, when I come back to here, is so special in the phosphate world. The igneous rock is special because when you process it to merchant grade phosphoric acid, which is fertilizer grade acid to start, that gypsum can be recycled, and that's only done in a few parts of the world. Everywhere else in the world where sedimentary deposit is processed, you got these massive slag piles, gypsum. It's a problem. The industry's working towards finding solutions to it, but it's much more important to feed people than it is right now to be on the full ESG standard for fertilizers, but they are moving towards it. Okay, so now we've got we've processed phosphate, whether it's sedimentary, the red areas, or blue, which basically the only exporters of sediment igneous phosphates are found in the northern peninsula of Russia. Okay, and there's only very few people in the world that process it. But when we process it for the battery, we will be able to fully recycle the gypsum. That's very important because ESG standards are very important for the battery industry. So that's the first transformation up to merchant grade phosphoric acid. Okay, now for the second phase, and to answer your second question, how does phosphate enter the battery? Well, like I said, phosphate already does not enter agriculture, directly from mining it. It's got to be beneficiated, right, to phosphate rock ore. and then it's got to be transformed into phosphoric acid, merchant grade phosphoric acid. After that, what happens is, it is then mixed with potassium, nitrogen, ammonia, and there's numbers of different formulations to make fertilizer. Okay, and then it stops there. With that, you can spread it on farm fields and you can feed animals. But if you want to move into what is human consumption, I'm going to show you what is purified phosphoric acid. Okay, here's a little bit on purified phosphoric acid. So, about 90% of the world's phosphate is just processed up to beneficiated rock and then to merchant grade phosphoric acid, MGA. And that 82% of that goes into fertilizers and 7% of that goes into animal feeds. But then you're left off with about 10% of the world's phosphate. What happens to that? Okay, so like I said, it gets, mined, it gets beneficiated, which means, concentrated. Then it gets moved up to merchant grade phosphoric acid. But then for this quantity here, this, 10% or so, it becomes what's called purified phosphoric acid, right? PPA. So MGA is for, animals and for fertilizer. PPA is for industrial applications. Now, what are those industrial applications? So there's food. You'll find it in the can of Coca-Cola, for instance. There's electronics. There's the LFP battery, which is what we're talking about. Industrial for paints, pharma, water, fire safety, and a number of other uses in the industrial world. So how do we get the PPA? To get the PPA, you've got to take MGA acid, and then you've got to give it another few transformations. There's proprietary processes that bring you up to PPA. Once you have PPA, then it can enter, food consumption and all these other uses. But when you start going into electronics, LFP, pharma, and some of these other specialty applications, you want to purify it even more. You want to remove all trace elements, all sulfur, and it becomes, almost a fanatical level of purity for the LFP battery. Okay, so I hope does that kind of explain to you,
Yes, absolutely.
how we get up to PPA? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so basically, and the reason why we're doing this is because, like, if we just look at basically what Ford has done recently, they're talking about, the LFP battery. I mean, we hear a lot of stuff, Tesla LFP battery, and it seems like the NMC type battery is more being pushed on the side, and a lot of that's due to cobalt. So the thing is that with LFP we have more cycling, longer life, and safety, of course, it is ranked up there as well. So the LFP battery, we're just going to need a lot more phosphate. Is that correct for the LFP battery?
So look, you made a few statements in there. So I'll start with the last one and then go backwards. So are we going to need a lot more phosphate for the LFP battery? Theoretically, yes. But what we're really going to need is what I just talked to you about, which is purified phosphoric acid.
Correct.
And it's the problem with all these battery materials. Like, do you need graphite for the battery? Do you need lithium for the battery? Well, you don't really need lithium. You need really purified lithium, right? You need lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate, and again, that's a whole other industry there. And it's really the purification. The devil's in the detail. Same with the graphite. Same with the nickel. Everything else that enters the battery system has got to be ultra pure because it conducts electricity. If it isn't, it causes shortages. So we don't need phosphate. We need purified phosphoric acid. So the question is, where are we going to get purified phosphoric acid, right? So let me just go back here and I'll share my screen again. And that's the biggest mistake. People think because LFP is lithium, iron, and phosphate, oh, well, iron's abundant, phosphate is pretty much abundant. You just take a bag of fertilizer, open up the hood or the trunk of an electric car, dump it in there, and the car runs. It's not like that, right? There's a process. So what did I want to show you here? So, this is kind of North American supply right now of merchant grade phosphoric acid, right? And like I said, merchant grade phosphoric acid is a precursor to purified phosphoric acid. This numbers, I believe, includes MGA and PPA. So if you look at what's been happening since the 1990s, 2000, really since 2000 in North America, and again, only in the US is produced, we have a decline. We have a decline in the amount of phosphoric acid being produced. And it's not getting any better, and the facilities are not being built to do it. Okay, so now we're talking, LFP battery because of all those, great advantages that you mentioned, and Ford wants to get into it. but there's no supply chain in North America to produce PPA and to produce LFP cathode active materials that a company like Ford can use, right? And that's kind of what First Phosphate is solving for. We're looking to do it here. We're looking to do it properly on the ESG standard. We're looking to make it traceable. We're looking to make it a secure supply source that's consistent and can be run for, just-in-time manufacturing systems. And again, that comes back to my background in technology. And, we're building a technological product here, right? Now, I want to show you this as well. This is important, right? This is kind of what we've done some market research at First Phosphate. And we've looked at what is, the phosphoric acid market in North America, expressed as P2O5, which is a theoretical calculation of phosphoric acid. But you can look at these metrics here as the phosphoric acid that's needed in North America. So, if LFP battery had not come along, right, you would still have, consistent amount of phosphoric acid needed in North America until 2034. But this is kind of the need that will balloon just for EVs, and very conservative estimates. This is how much extra phosphoric acid will be needed. We put this in gray because obviously cathode active material is kind of grayish, right? So, and this is just EVs. You need to understand as well that, when I go down here, for instance, electric vehicles will only occupy this slice of the lithium ion battery market, right? So what we're saying here is that only this slice is going to do this to phosphoric acid, an increase of about 35% by 2030, okay? What we haven't done yet is we haven't calculated, what is energy storage going to do? And the lithium iron phosphate battery is great for energy storage because it's, less quantities of, the nickel, manganese, and cobalt, which are already in very low supply, and it's cheap. It's easy to do. So you could see lithium iron phosphate batteries really running a lot of, energy coming off of solar farms, hydroelectric dams, et cetera, et cetera. So energy storage is going to be, here they have it as a smaller component. My opinion is it's going to be, much bigger than EVs alone. Then you've got consumer electronics, and then you've got other uses. So if we're predicting that, this little slice here of EVs, very conservatively, probably half or a third of what it's really going to be, is going to already bump up purified phosphoric acid needs by 35%. Wow, right? What an opportunity, and what a pinch there's going to be. What a pinch there's going to be on phosphoric acid, right? The other thing I'd like you to focus on here, if you look at, if you go onto our website, www.firstphosphate.com, and you click on the LFP section, you'll come to a section that talks about LFP strategy, and you'll see our strategy there. You can click on this article. This article was written in Battery Metals Review. It was written by the editor there, as well as Yves Caprara. Yves Caprara is a advisor to First Phosphate, who's also the president of Crayon, a Belgian company that is the global leader in creation of purified phosphoric acid. So he predicts the big shock that's coming in the LFP supply chain in North America and all over the world based on purified phosphoric acid. When we go back again to this slide here, and we look at phosphate, right? Phosphate rock. So phosphate rock concentrate. This is phosphate rock that has come out of the mine, whatever percentage in the mine, but it's been concentrated up to, with igneous rock, we get it up to almost 41% purity. Sedimentary levels get to 25 to 34. And this is before you start any of the processing to MGA or to PPA. That's 90%. Sorry, that's the beneficiated phosphate rock. But then what ends up happening with that is, you take that and it's got to go to purified phosphoric acid. So, inside of this slice here, which is the industrial component of phosphate worldwide, let's say the LFP battery takes up, 3% of this, 4%, 5%. Maybe by 2020, it takes up, 10%. So basically, you would see this slice here of industrial go from 10% to maybe 20% by 2030, 2040, based on how LFP develops. So phosphate rock, will require 10% more in the world, right? So that's already put a bit of a shock to phosphate rock concentrate that will affect price. But what's it going to do, inside of this, right? PPA. purified phosphoric acid, right? And again, then I'll talk to you about something else called battery grade phosphoric acid, right? And I've already talked to you about that. It's where you take purified phosphoric acid, which is, food grade for Coca-Cola, for industrial uses, but then you've got to take it up to another level for the battery to make it battery grade. You got to take out every single little last bit of trace elements in there. So, I talked about, phosphate rock maybe having an increase of 5 or 10% globally from the LFP battery by 2030, 2040. But look, what's it going to do to purified phosphoric acid? So right here, just on EVs alone, just in North America, we're predicting, a very, very, very conservative increase of 35%. I think that's going to be more. I think that could already be 100% in the EV sector. Then you add on to that the large scale transportation sector, okay, and then you add on to that consumer electronics, and you add on to that lightweight small vehicles. We're working on these demand projections right now. Like this could balloon out to be 500% increase in the need for purified phosphoric acid, but the supply is just not coming online. No one's putting the supply online. All the phosphate in North America that's produced, it's out of a few small mines. They only have 10, the maximum 20 years of life left. They're in areas where they're creating problems with these gypsum slag piles. The residents don't want them anymore. It's not going to be possible to open new mines, and quite frankly, the reserves are not necessarily there. It's all dedicated to fertilizer. You can't cut off the fertilizer because you cut off the food. So where's the new phosphate going to come for the LFP battery industry, right? So, we started to work a little bit with Queen's University. Pierre Poufal is a professor at Queen's University with, I think, in my opinion, the foremost expert on sedimentary phosphates in the world, and he's starting to look at igneous with us. And here's a clear statement from him, right? 85% of the world's phosphate is in North Africa. It's hard to get to. It's mostly used for agriculture. And in North America, you need a specific deposit that's focused directly on the LFP battery. And where are you going to get it? Everything else is being used in fertilizer. So, this deposit that we have here in Quebec, and especially because of their purity and the ability to process on ESG without the gypsum slag piles, is going to be very sought after for the LFP battery industry. So, First Phosphate has a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity, once-in-a-generation opportunity here to go after a massive market with, very large margins, because no one else is going to have the phosphoric acid. There's going to be a major squeeze on it, and it's going to be kind of like what happened to lithium right now. But nobody gets this yet. No one's talking about it. No one's studied the LFP battery, the phosphate like we have, I believe. Those in the know do see it happening, just the same squeeze as there is on lithium right now, and in very short order. So I believe that whatever First Phosphate can produce in terms of purified phosphoric acid and in terms of LFP cathode active materials is going to be eaten up very quick in the North American market. Let's get back to your question about LFP batteries versus nickel, manganese, and cobalt batteries. I take a very different approach than most people. I don't believe that the two batteries are in competition with one another. I believe that they're complementary. What I believe is that nickel, manganese, and cobalt batteries have been there for a long time. They're also integrated already into some of the gigafactory projects, a lot of the battery production processes. It's important to realize, Albert, that there's something called a homologation process when you create these batteries. And that, that sometimes can take 3 to 5 years. So if you created a process based on all these NMC technologies, you're married to them for the next 5 or 10 years. Yeah. So, NMC batteries is going to continue with, what is dedicated to it. NMC battery for the moment also is, much better in terms of, some of the higher end uses. Like it's got a little bit better range. It's got a little bit of better power to keep it really, to dumb it down. But also, if you look at the LFP battery, it's different, right? It's for, it can handle shorter ranges, fine, but it's a good car for the city, going to do the groceries, picking up the kids, going to work. If you look down here, the cost of LFP cathode active materials is about 1/3 to 1/2 of what the cost is of NMC based cathode active materials. So that's really important to the auto manufacturers. But what's really, really important to them is, superior fire safety. They're safe. And if you remember, back in the 1950s, what started the economic boom after the Second War was really consumer electronics and cars and all these, middle class uses. And the car was, the station wagon, the family sedan. And how did that get going? That got going. It was all about safety. It was all about putting a warranty on something on a car. So that, this LFP battery allows that. It allows for a warranty. It allows for superior fire safety. They last long. They're environmentally friendly. They can be recycled. And I think something that's really, really important I want to leave with you and your viewers is that at the beginning of every technology cycle, people are doing things theoretically. Things are happening in labs, right? But then near the end of that cycle, when things actually have to go into the real world, it's more practical use case that wins, right? So, the theoretical batteries that were created and that they're all amazing and all that, whether NMC or whatever it is, I'm not picking on anybody. Once you have to go into mass production of these things, sometimes the quick and dirty approach, sometimes the more expedient approach or the more logistically sound approach works. And that's where LFP battery is winning. It's really the battery of mass adoption. The auto manufacturers are starting to see it as, it's a good old all-round battery. Sure, it's not going to beat every other battery in every other sector, just like all of us, right? As humans, we've got our strengths and our weaknesses. But in terms of like a good average battery that can do the work, you can give it a warranty, it can keep people safe, it's cost effective. And what we believe is believing that we can source it, right? That's going to be a problem. We can't source it, but First Phosphate is making it such that this can be sourced. Okay, our opinion and our vision is to create from Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean the LFP battery valley of North America, from which all the purified phosphoric acid for battery needs and all of the LFP cathode active material for all of North America can be sourced. It can be sourced right here at home. It can be consistent. It can be on an ESG standard. It can be traceable. It can be, ethical, everything that we need. And if we can do that, my gosh, those demand predictions will go even crazier, because it's going to be where you can get it, who can produce it. And that's what we want to do. Like I said, we want to work from the bottoms up, not from the tops down. So that's kind of my view, NMC versus LFP. I think they're complementary, but I think you need to be invested in both. I think people are very underinvested in LFP. I think LFP is going to hit this continent with a landslide, a tidal wave. It's a big tsunami effect. We're seeing it already with the CATL and Ford news. Ford wants to do it, but for now, they don't have the supply within North America. First Phosphate will resolve that over time. So I think that's a very important indicator of what is to come. Now, I'm just going to take a few minutes here and just show you a little bit about our business model, okay? So, and how we see the supply chain, the ecosystem for phosphate within the LFP battery within North America, and where we see Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean, okay? So this is the stages of the LFP battery, or of the EV cycle, right? So first you mine, then you have to, beneficiate the rock, then you create, phosphoric acid, and then you create LFP cathode active material. That cathode active material goes to the battery cells and battery packs, creates the battery goes into the EV. Then at the end of the day, you recycle the battery, So where do we see ourselves? So First Phosphate, like I said, we're bottoms up, right? And these are the guys coming at us from the tops down, the gigafactory guys. Okay. So we're bottoms up in that, we're going to focus on putting in place, an open pit mine and a very high ESG standard. Okay. And we're going to, extract phosphate ore from the ground at about 5-10 to 10%. At the mining site, that gets concentrated up to about 40 to 41% phosphate within apatite, which is the host mineral for the phosphate. Then at that point, we already talked about it. You got advanced refinement. This is where you create merchant grade phosphoric acid, and after that, you go to purified phosphoric acid, and after that, you go to battery grade phosphoric acid. We're putting together, the partnerships and everything to get us from here to here. And then the next step is going to be, once we have the purified phosphoric acid, we're going to be able to work with others in the lithium space and those who have the technology to create LFP cathode active material. Okay. Now, you have to create that LFP cathode active material somewhere. It has to be somewhere where there's propitious conditions to do it, right? You can't just do it everywhere. So what do you need? You need a lot of industrial space, right? Industrial space is very hard to find in the Western world. So at the Port of Saguenay, we have an MOU in place that we've got the lands to be able to do massive amounts of industrial activity, massive amounts of clean industrial activity. Bring the beneficiated rock to the port. Mine will probably be no more than 100, 140 kilometers from the port. We could create a phosphoric acid plant at the port, or we could toll process and bring in the phosphate, our phosphate rock, which has been beneficiated elsewhere, and then we can mix that with lithium, which can come into the port. It could come in by rail, it can come in by boat, and then we also need iron sulfate. Now, iron sulfate is going to be a very difficult one to source in North America, but we have titanium that come out of our reserves, so we're already looking at a strategy to be able to process further the titanium, and one of the byproducts of titanium recovery, titanium purification, is iron sulfate. So we believe that we'll have all the elements at the Port of Saguenay and what we're working towards to really put this together and to do make the LFP cathode active material at the port. Once the LFP cathode active material is made, then it's in a more sort of stable state. It's easier to ship. You can then ship it to anywhere in North America where they can assemble the batteries and make EVs. So at this point, we would hand it off to the guys making the batteries. And guess who makes the batteries, right? Like CATL is one of the ones that make the batteries. And that's why there's been so much, talk about CATL, and because, guys up here, Ford, need the battery, right? But if CATL made the battery in North America or gave the technology to Ford, my understanding would be that there's still nowhere to get the cathode active material. There's nowhere to get any of this inside of North America. So they would have to get this from CATL, which basically gets it from China. And then we have to start talking about, this. How do you make the phosphate, right? How is the phosphate made in China? This is, mostly the process around thermal phosphate in China. It creates, about 10 times the amount of CO2 emissions, if not more. I know that CATL and some of their suppliers are moving towards the wet process. So they might be moving towards the wet process, which is one that we use in North America to make phosphoric acid. But then again, you still remain with the problem of the gypsum slag piles. But First Phosphate really just covers it all, right? We can make it, on a very low carbon footprint. We can recycle the gypsum, and we can create a large portion of purified phosphoric acid because of the purity of the rock. I think I've answered all your questions. I'm taking some really long time to do it, but I think
absolutely. Honestly, it's quite amazing, and I like this slide over here, just so that the viewers out there just understand one more time. So basically, First Phosphate, from what I understand, because I've done some research, and others have done some research, and you're basically you're going to be the first North American publicly traded battery grade phosphate company out there. Is that correct?
Well, look, we're
from what I've seen, anyways.
I want to caution. We aspire to be all those things, right? It's a long road to get there, so we have to be careful not to mislead investors. But this is our plan, right? This is the plan to do it. It doesn't happen overnight, just like all the gigafactories don't happen overnight. But this is where we're moving. We're moving to create this plan within the next few years, such that when the demand is there for the electric vehicles, we will have the source materials to do it. And yes, we'll be the only publicly traded company in the world, in my opinion, that is geared towards phosphate and exclusively phosphate towards the LFP battery industry. And I'll explain.
Yeah.
If you want, I'll explain why that's possible. So it's possible because when you take sedimentary phosphates and you purify them, there's only a minority of that beneficiated rock that can be turned into purified phosphoric acid. The rest of it has to stay behind in the MGA fertilizer stream. Why? Because it's filled with so many impurities. But when you start with a rock like the Quebec anorthosite rock, anorthosite igneous rock, which is it's the purest form of occurring phosphate in the world, we're able to convert over 80% of that into purified phosphoric acid. So with a mine size that it's a tenth of a sedimentary mine, we can create a lot of purified phosphoric acid, which means we can be focused exclusively on the LFP battery. Whereas when you're treating sedimentary rocks, like if we go back down to this slide, you're always going to be first and foremost a fertilizer player, right?
Absolutely.
When you're into igneous rock, we can be first and foremost, an LFP battery player. We'll have very small streams that go into fertilizer, and that's not really of interest to us. Just something that, you'd sell on the open market. But, we can be focused on the needs of the technology client. Like, we want to be focused on what are the needs of these guys down here in the battery cells and in the EVs. And also, like I said, I talked about something before called a homologation process. Like, it takes time for them to have their materials produced in such a consistent format that they can enter the battery and then they can be sure of them. And that's a process that can take years. And once you're into that process, that's it. You're captive. Nobody else can come out and compete with you. It's going to be a whole new process to do it. And when we go back down here and we look at the phosphate in North America, like, I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Phosphate in North America, there's the reserves here in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. They're predominantly owned by two companies that are publicly traded. That's Nutrien and Mosaic. Mosaic is, I believe, 100% of the fertilizer. Nutrien does make fertilizer, but it also does make purified phosphoric acid. And it is the only, I think, native producer of purified phosphoric acid in all of North America, based on its own reserves. And then up here in this corner, you've got Itafos and JD Simplot. Simplot is a private company. Itafos is a public company. But again, they're into fertilizer. So all of this is here, whatever we have, which is already, it's extinguishing over time.
Yes.
And down here, it's all dedicated towards fertilizer, other than, Nutrien's mines, which, I don't know what their capacity would be to create more purified phosphoric acid. We've got a company here in Mexico, Inofos, I believe it's publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and they make food phosphates, right? But they get their supply of rock from Morocco. So, in terms of just being there and being able to produce just for the LFP battery and having it at the proper ESG standards and, outside of fertilizer, I mean, that's only First Phosphate, right? Like, this is why I got involved in this company. This is why I became the CEO, because I just see such a massive moat around this, especially from North America with the IRA Act in place now, where these materials have to be sourced from North America, extinguishing mines in North America, everything that's we already have in North America being dedicated to fertilizer, that process not being the most ESG friendly or requiring a little bit of improvement, and us being able to do it ESG just for the battery sector, with smaller mine size, smaller capex dedicated towards value add in an industry where purified phosphoric acid (PPA) is going to be pinched so badly, so quickly, and the price is going to be skyrocketing. And if the price on the LFP cathode active material will skyrocket as well, as will the price on all these LFP cathode active materials, even within the NMC family, when it becomes abundantly clear that there just isn't enough mineral to meet these energy transition needs, and we've already seen that in the price of lithium over the last couple of years. We're very excited. We're putting together the solution, right? Like, First Phosphate is a solution to the North American problem around LFP cathode active material. The Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean area of North America will become the LFP battery valley of North America. I think as well that, the most important thing is there's just nowhere else to get the phosphate in North America. There's some smaller sedimentary mines in different places, but there's really nowhere else you can get the purified phosphate that's going to be required for this industry, other than what we have in Quebec. And even lithium is rare, but it's rare in the form of getting it out of the ground and mined. But there are lithium mines in North America, but phosphate, there's just no other regions or occurrences of phosphate. There's just such a moat around First Phosphate that, I just see this being, a massive opportunity here, multi-generational opportunity, where we can go from, a mine to a bag of cathode active material in the same way that, Nutrien or Mosaic go from a mine all the way to a bag of fertilizer in fully vertically integrated fashion. Now, It takes time to build that. It takes, it takes a lot of vertical integration, it takes really, steady hands and solid execution. But, we've got the world-class team around us to do that. We have advisors from all over the world, a great board, great advisory team, great management. And I think, if anybody can do it, we can do it. And we expect, industry to support us in that, because the solutions are few.
Absolutely. Your team is rock solid. That is for sure. I think that we should talk about your team on our next interview, because we should mention them, because you have a rock solid team out there. And what I really like is the fact of the indigenous rock and how, you know, when we're talking about the ESG standards, and of course, not having all that gypsum problem, and that we can actually reuse it. I think that this is great. I mean, we're looking at pretty much a very green project over here. And you know what? Quebec and Ontario, for everybody that's watching, I mean, look, I've been talking to people around the world, whether it's from Germany, whether it's Australia, all eyes are on Canada. You look at the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, we're taking things out of the mine, and then we're actually building the cars. This is exactly what Ontario and Quebec is all about. And, you know, having First Phosphate, you know, directly look at a, a niche that is absolutely needed, and not seeing anything else out there like this. And you know what? There's been a lot of excitement, a lot of news about your company. I'm going to be putting up some of, you know, the news clippings over here, just to show that, you know, Quebec. There's been a lot of, in the French press media, just super excited about all of this, and they should be. Everybody should be. I mean, this is a great project, and we're looking at, you know, the future, right? We're looking at basically reducing climate climate change, you know, bringing all of this, you know, letting our children be able to live in a world where, you know, they won't be burning when they go outside. John, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add.
We're here for investors. You know, we believe in, you know, large investor transparency. We believe in, you know, communication. You know, we want to be present with the investors. You know, we want to answer every single question. No question is considered too silly. You know, so please ask us the hard questions. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. We're also learning. This is new to everybody. But you know, feel free to reach out anytime. And you know, I just would beseech everybody, just take the time and do the research. It's fascinating. You know, the world of phosphate is fascinating. I love it, and I think it's important that, you know, we work as a community to get these projects off the ground. I think supply chain is going to be everything in North America, and you know, also, I think it's really important. You mentioned Canada, you mentioned Quebec. I think it's really important that we add value to these products. You know, there's a lot of projects that are creating lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, copper, but, you know, we're just giving this stuff away. We're giving this stuff away in terms of, you know, raw ore, and then it goes somewhere else in the world. You know, for the time being, it's been mostly China. It gets beneficiated, at value added there, right? Then it gets into a highly purified format, just kind of like, you know, our purified phosphoric acid. There's massive value determination there, value add there. And then, you know, from there it goes to LFP cathode active material, and that's massive leap value, right? And there it goes into the batteries, and then it goes into the cars. So, you know, I beseech, you know, Quebec government, Canadian government, you know, all of us as, you know, individual consumers, people, you know, who want the better out of North America, you know, out of our country and out of our world, start considering local supply chains. Start considering local supply chains that, you know, are ESG driven. Obviously, you know, you start bringing the mining and the beneficiation and the manufacture back to our countries. It's a very good thing, but, you know, we have to do it on proper standards, right? We have to involve the communities around us. We have to work towards solutions. Nothing's ever perfect. You're never going to get 100% anywhere, but you got to do your best to, you know, satisfy the cleanliness needs of, and to keep the manufacturing and the jobs and the value added in our countries. Because if we're going to go through all the hard work of, you know, extracting the rock, you know, and any of the challenges around that, any of the impacts around that, why should we not also participate in the benefits, right? Yeah, the benefits being the jobs, the benefits, you know, being value added industry, and the benefits of feeling good about ourselves that, you know what, we can do it, right? We can become a really major part of the EV and, you know, electric transition, and own a part of it and be right up at the top of the world at it, right?
Yeah.
We have to stop this practice in North America and Canada and Quebec of just giving away our natural resources. That has to come to an end. That's been going on for what, 100, 200 years. You know, it's still an old colonial model. People complain about the colonial model, you know, in other parts of the world, but, you know, we're still on a colonial model in that we're just selling away our raw materials. But I think there's been a really massive wake-up call. You know, the U.S. Department of Energy has done, some hard work and made some tough choices, subsidize, pick some of the winners in the electric space, electric vehicle space. They've committed, what is it? I think it's $2 to $3 billion to that industry, and they're committing even more. Sometimes you got to wonder about that, right? Is it right to just go to certain companies and pick the winners? But at the end of the day, they're making a big commitment to their industry, to their country, and to North America. And Canada, Quebec, we gotta think about the way we fit into that, right? And we got to be a part of it. We got to add the value. We got to keep the value here at home. And everyone's got to get more educated about this, starting with myself. And that's the way I look at it.
You know what, John? Thank you so much. Really excited about this project. Can't wait to actually see it more. I mean, you're going to be under the ticker symbol of PHOS.
FOSS.
FOSS. That's correct. I like that very much. And it should be maybe this week, or when can we expect that?
Yeah, we're looking at being listed on, I believe it's going to be probably Wednesday of this coming week, around there. We just got our conditional approval on Thursday. Our capital raise is completed. We've gone out for our last raise of 2 million. I think we've reached about 4.5 million. So that's great. Oversubscribed in very difficult markets. We have a great shareholder base, Albert. All of our shareholders in the last 2 rounds of financing accepted escrows, where their shares, 25% of their shares come free every 4 months. It means, they're long-term oriented. All of the fast money that wanted to play momentum did not come into this deal, was not allowed into this company. And so, we're here to build a company. We're not here to build a deal on the stock market. As they say, like, we're here to build a company. We see it as a long-term approach. It takes time. We need to build it with, proper, sophisticated investors who understand the story. We're going to be communicating the story as much as we can. To the best of our knowledge, we're going to be honest and transparent with investors. If things are not going so right, we'll let you know. We'll let you know that we're working on solutions. In my career, it's never been about the right solution. It's been about, fixing the problems, stepping into it and finding solutions as you go along. So we have a plan, but, obviously things always change on the way. And, we're going to be responding to challenges as they occur. So yeah, we're really set up with a really nice base of investors. Encourage people to do their homework, have a look at the company, become involved, and stay in touch with us, share with us any of your ideas, and partake in this beautiful journey, right? This beautiful journey
Absolutely.
in the Saguenay Valley. I wanted to talk a little bit about Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean region of Quebec, if you give me an opportunity. I mean, it's a beautiful area. It's got environmental sensitivities. There's the fjord in there, which has got very specific marine and aquatic life. But it's a beautiful place to live, to work, just to be. And, it'd be really nice for us to bring another industry, the magnitude of the current industry that's there, which is, Alcan Aluminum, which is now Rio Tinto. We believe that we can create over the next few years an industry that's as vibrant as that one, a full new economy industry on the ESG scale. We can make a massive impact for that region, but one that's, together with, the aims and the pursuits of the environmental stewardship, and one that's in the aims of, continuing and growing the community, right? It's unfortunate sometimes in some of these more rural areas, and the Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean has experienced that, where their kids have to leave to go find jobs elsewhere. Yeah. Because there's only been one industry there for the last 100 years. So we want to be able to bring something new where people can actually come in and just see the beauty of the Saguenay-Lac-St-Jean area. And in the future, we'll be hosting events in the area, and hopefully that people can come and see what a beautiful part of the world this is in many respects, and can have beautiful sort of synergy or symbiosis between what is proper community environmental stewardship and new industry for the future.
Absolutely. A lot of people always forget about the amount of jobs that you guys create. Honestly, thank you for that. John, I would love to be able to have you here as this story unfolds. Would you be willing to come back?
Yeah, absolutely, Albert. Anytime. Yeah, you're great. Your questions were awesome. And, if you can round up some of the questions from your viewers sometimes and, put me on the spot, give me a question that I'm going to say, I got to get back to you on that one. That was too tough.
Be careful, because my viewers, they my Gmail just gets lots of questions.
Well, you filter that and you put it into one big hammer and then you throw it at me, okay?
Oh boy,
on our
okay,
next
all right.
interview, and we'll go from there.
That sounds like a great plan. So everybody, be on the lookout for PHOS, PHOS. Look out for that. And John, thank you so much once again. Thank you for being on Betweenplays. And for everybody out there, always remember: research, prepare, plan, execute. John, thank you. Have yourself a great day.
Thank you, Albert. Take care. All the
Take
best.
care. All right, all the
Bye-bye.
best. Bye.
Betweenplays, it's the journey and what you do between where you are and where you want to be. Research, prepare.
Betweenplays owns shares and has a contract with First Phosphate at the time of this video. Betweenplays only takes contracts with companies we believe have an opportunity to deliver a product or service based on our own research. That being said, always do your own due diligence, seek a professional financial analyst when investing. This video is for entertainment and educational purposes. See description for more information.
Betweenplays, bridging the gap between companies and investors.